November 21st, 1899, Volume 3. Jesus wants to delight in reflecting himself in Luisa, who is helped by the Most Holy Virgin. This morning as he came, my most beloved Jesus told me, "My daughter, all your pleasures must be in reflecting yourself in me. If you do this always, you will portray all of my qualities, my physiognomy, and my very features within yourself, and I, in return, will find all my taste and highest contentment in delighting in reflecting myself in you." Having said this, he disappeared, and I was meditating in my mind on the words he had just spoken to me. All of a sudden he came back, placing his holy hand on my head, and turning my face toward him, he added, "Today I want to delight a little bit by reflecting myself in you." A shiver ran about my whole waist, such a fright as to feel I was dying, because I saw that he was staring at me, wanting to delight in my thoughts, gazes, words, and in all the rest, by reflecting himself in me. I kept repeating in my interior, "Oh God, am I an object fit for letting you take delight, or for embittering you?" In the meantime, our dear Queen Mamma came to my help, carrying a pure white garment in her hands, and all loving she told me, "Daughter, do not fear. I myself want to make up for you by clothing you with my innocence, so that in reflecting himself in you, my son may find the greatest delight that can be found in a human creature." So she clothed me with that garment, and she offered me to my dear good Jesus, telling him, "Accept her out of regard for me, O dear son, and delight in her." So every fear went away from me, and Jesus delighted in me, and I in him. November 21st, 1902, Volume 4. Jesus uses the nature of Luisa to continue the course of his sufferings within her. As I still could neither lose consciousness nor sleep, my poor nature could take no more. But then, when I felt convinced more than ever that I would not see him any more, all of a sudden my dearest Jesus came and made me lose consciousness. I was as though struck by lightning. Who can say my fear? I had no more control over myself. It was no longer in my power to regain consciousness. Jesus told me, "My daughter, do not fear. I have come to strengthen you. Don't you yourself see how you can take no more, and how your nature fails you without me?" And I said to him, crying, "On my life, without you I am dead. I feel no more vital strengths. You used to form my whole being, and if I do not have you, I lack everything. Indeed, if you continue not coming, I will die of sorrow." And he, "My beloved daughter, you say that I am your life, and I say to you that you are my living life. Just as I made use of my humanity to suffer, so am I using your nature to continue the course of my sufferings within you. Therefore you are all mine. Even more, you are my very life." And as he was saying this, I remembered the obedience, and I said to him, "My sweet good, will you let me obey by allowing me to come round by myself?" And he, "My daughter, I, the Creator, have obeyed the creature by keeping you suspended in these days. It is only right now for the creature to obey his Creator by submitting to my will, because before my divine will, the human reason does not count, and the strongest reason before the supreme will resolves into smoke. Who can say how embittered I was left? But I was resigned, making a vow to the Lord never to withdraw my will from his, not even for the blink of an eye. And since they had told me that if I was surprised by that state, and would not come round by myself, they would let me die. I was preparing myself for death, considering this a great fortune, and I prayed the Lord to take me in his arms. While I was doing this, the confessor came to make me come round, embittering me more. So much so that, seeing me so embittered, the Lord told me in my interior, "Tell him to concede to me 2 more days of suspension, to give him the time to know what to do." Then the confessor left, leaving me all pierced, and as though filled with bitterness. And Jesus, letting me hear his voice again, told me, "Poor daughter, how they embitter her. I feel my heart being lacerated in seeing you like this. Courage, do not fear, my daughter, and then remember that it is by the intervention of obedience that you were suspended from this state. If now they do not want it any more, I will also let you obey. Is this not the nail that pierces you the most, not being able to obey?" And I, "Yes." "Well, then, I have promised you I will let you obey. Therefore I do not want you to embitter yourself any more. However, tell them, do they want to play games with me? Woe to those who want to play games with me and fight against my will." And I, "How can I go on without you? In fact, if I am not surprised by that state, I do not see you." And he, "Since it is not your will to go out of this state of sacrifice, I will find other ways to make myself seen and be with you. Aren't you happy?" So the following morning, without my losing consciousness, he made himself seen sensibly by giving me a few drops of milk to refresh me, since my weakness was extreme. November 21st, 1907, Volume 8, Love and Union Between Creator and Creature. Continuing in my usual state, I was uniting myself with our Lord, making his thought, his heartbeat, his breath, and all of his movements one with mine, and then adding the intention of going to all creatures, to give all this to all. And since I was united to Jesus in the Garden of Olives, I also gave to all and to each one, and also to the purging souls, the drops of his blood, his prayers, his pains, and all the good he did, so that all the breaths, movements, and heartbeats of creatures might be repaired, purified, divinized. And I gave the font of all goods, which are his pains, as remedies for all. While I was doing this, blessed Jesus told me in my interior, "My daughter, with these intentions of yours you wound me continuously, and since you do them often, one arrow does not wait for another, and I am always wounded again." And I said, "How can it be possible that you are wounded, when you hide and make me suffer so much in waiting for your coming? Are these the wounds? Is this the love you have for me?" And he, "Rather, I have said nothing of all I should tell you. The soul herself, while she is a pilgrim, cannot comprehend all the good and love that passes between creatures and Creator, that her operating, speaking, suffering, is all in my life, and that only by acting in this way can she do good to all. I will just tell you that each thought, heartbeat, and movement of yours, each member of yours, any suffering bone of yours, are as many lights that come out from you. And as they touch me, I melt them for the good of all, while I send back to you tripled as many other lights of grace, and in heaven I will give them to you of glory. It is enough to tell you that there is such union, such closeness, that the Creator is the organ, and the creature is the sound. The Creator the sun, the creature the rays, the Creator the flower, the creature the fragrance. Can one perhaps be without the other? Certainly not. Do you think that I do not take into account all your interior work and your pains. How can I forget them if they come from my very self and are one thing with me? I also add that every time my passion is remembered, since it is a treasure exposed for the good of all, it is as if one put it on a counter to multiply it and distribute it for the good of all. November 21st, 1915, Volume 11. The current chastisements are only the beginning of the purification of the world. Finding myself in my usual state, as soon as I saw my always adorable Jesus, I begged him, for pity's sake, that he would change the decrees of the divine justice. I said to him, "My Jesus, I cannot take any more. My poor heart is crushed in hearing about so many tragedies. Jesus, enough. These are your dear images, your beloved children, who moan, cry, and ache under the weight of instruments that are almost infernal." And he, "Ah, my daughter, yet all the terrible things that are happening now are only the sketch of the design. Don't you see what a large circle I am marking? What will happen when I will complete the design? At many points they will say, 'Here there was such a city, here such buildings.' Some points will disappear completely. Time is tight. Man reached the extent of forcing me to chastise him. He wanted to almost challenge me, incite me, and I remained patient. But all times arrive. They didn't want to recognize me through love and mercy. They will know me through justice. Therefore, courage. Do not lose heart so soon." November 21st, 1926, Volume 20. Tenderness of Jesus at the moment of death. How one who lives in the divine will has primacy over everything. I was feeling all afflicted because of the sudden death of one of my sisters. The fear that my lovable Jesus might not have her with himself tormented my soul. And as my highest good, Jesus, came, I told him of my pain, and he, all goodness, said to me, "My daughter, do not fear. Is there perhaps not my will that makes up for everything, for the very sacraments and for all the helps that can be given to a poor dying one? Much more so when there is not the will of the person of not wanting to receive the sacraments and all the helps of the Church that, like Mother, she gives at that extreme moment. You know, in kidnapping her suddenly from the earth, my will made me surround her with the tenderness of my humanity. My heart, human and divine, placed my most tender fibers into the field of action, in such a way that her defects, her weaknesses, her passions, have been looked upon and weighed with such finesse of tenderness, infinite and divine. And when I place my tenderness into the field, I cannot help having compassion, and letting her pass into a safe harbor, as triumph of the tenderness of your Jesus. And besides, don't you know that where human helps are lacking, divine helps abound? You fear that there was no one around her, and that if she wanted help, she had no one from whom to ask for it. Ah, my daughter, in that moment the human helps cease. They have neither value nor effect, because the dying enter into the sole and prime act with their Creator, and to no one is it given to enter this prime act. And then for one who is not perverted, a sudden death serves in order to prevent the diabolical action from entering the field. His temptations and fears that, with so much art, he strikes into the dying because he feels them being snatched from him, without being able to tempt them or follow them. Therefore, what by men is believed to be disgrace, many times is more than grace. After this I abandoned all of myself in the supreme volition, and my sweet Jesus, resuming his speaking, told me, "My daughter, one who lives in my will has primacy over everything and over all the acts of creatures. She has her act as first in love before her Creator. So if the other creatures love, the soul who lives in my will is first in loving. The others come, some second, some third, some fourth, according to the intensity of their love. If the other creatures adore me, glorify me, pray me, the soul who lives in my will first is first in adoring me, in glorifying me, in praying me. And this is natural, because my will is life and prime act of all creatures. Therefore one who lives in it finds herself in its prime act, and she is first before God, above all creatures, in doing all of their acts and in doing all the acts that they do not do. So the sovereign Queen of Heaven, who never gave life to her own will, but had her life fully in my will, holds as though the right of primacy. Therefore she is first in loving us, in glorifying us, in praying us. If we see that the other creatures love us, it is behind the love of the celestial Queen. If they glorify us and pray us, it is behind the glory and the prayers of she who holds primacy, and therefore empire over everything. How beautiful it is to see that, as creatures love us, she never gives up her first place in love. Even more, she places herself as prime act. She makes her sea of love flow around the Majesty in such a way that the other creatures remain behind the sea of love of the celestial Mamma, with their little drops of love, and so with all the other acts. Ah, my daughter, to live in my will is one word, but it is a word that weighs as much as eternity. It is a word that embraces everything and everyone. End of November 21st. Fiat.